I didn't fly planes. I built houses. 30 years in architecture. Hospitals with seismic tolerances. Corporate campuses with glass atriums that reflected entire skylines. Subdivisions where every drainage slope and load-bearing beam passed through my hands before concrete ever touched soil. But none of those projects carried weight the way this one did. This one was for my daughter. Emily used to sit at the kitchen table when she was 6, sketching crooked floor plans on scrap paper while I reviewed blueprints from work. She'd slide her drawings across the table and say, "Daddy, this is where the light goes. Not the window. The light." As if she instinctively understood that a house isn't walls, it's orientation, warmth, intention. I kept some of those drawings. When she got engaged at 29 and said she wanted something special, not just a house, but something designed, I didn't hear a financial request. I heard that little girl at the kitchen table again. I bought the lot outside Austin myself. 2 acres with a west-facing elevation. The topography had a natural slope that allowed for stepped foundations and dramatic sunset views without compromising stability. I ran soil tests personally. Clay-heavy, but manageable with the right footing depth. I spent evenings refining the plans long after my firm's commercial projects were signed off. Panoramic windows facing the horizon, triple pane, low-E coated. An upstairs studio with consistent northern light for her photography hobby. A downstairs workshop with reinforced flooring in case she ever wanted heavy equipment. Full smart home integration, surveillance, zoning, climate optimization. An energy-efficient facade engineered to outperform most builds in the county. I oversaw excavation myself. Stood in the dirt while the rebar was set. I walked every room after framing, visualizing how sound would travel, how the light would fall at 4 p.m. in October. 18 months of precision. 18 months of quiet pride. When construction finished, I walked through alone first. I do that with every structure I build. You listen to it. A house tells you whether it's right. It was right. The day I handed Emily the keys for the walk-through, the place smelled like fresh cedar and new paint. Sunlight poured through the glass exactly the way I had calculated. Emily stepped inside slowly. Derek followed. Derek, her fiancé, a crypto trader with strong opinions and weak foundations. He dressed expensively but carelessly. Loafers without socks. A watch too large for his wrist. Confidence without restraint. Emily turned in a slow circle in the entryway. I waited. She took a breath and said one word. Basic. Not joking. Not hesitant. Basic. Derek smirked, the kind of smirk men wear when they believe they're more current than the world around them. Yeah, he added, tapping the concrete floor with his shoe. Glass and concrete are the vibe now. This feels suburban Pinterest. Emily nodded. The kitchen's kind of traditional. I thought we'd do something more modern. And the exterior, it's safe. I don't know. It just doesn't feel bold. I stood in the center of a 4,000 square foot custom home I had built debt-free as a wedding gift and listened to my daughter critique its trend alignment. I didn't defend it. I didn't explain thermal efficiency ratings. I didn't explain structural longevity. I simply observed. Contempt is subtle. It doesn't shout. It tightens around the mouth. It lingers in the eyes half a second too long. Derek's hand rested at the small of her back as he surveyed my work like a venture capitalist reviewing a mediocre pitch deck. They weren't evaluating the house. They were evaluating me. I nodded once. You can always remodel, I said calmly. No argument. No wounded pride. But I memorized her expression. And I memorized his. Because at 65, you learn something about silence. Silence is not weakness. It's reconnaissance. That night, I sat in my study and opened the property file. Construction was complete, but title transfer had not yet occurred. The house remained in my name, technically an investment property until after the wedding. I had planned to deed it over as a gift once vows were exchanged. Clean transfer. No mortgage. No strings. But gifts are for people who understand value. And value is not something you lecture about. It's something you demonstrate. I pulled every document. Title insurance. Builder's risk policy. Appraisal draft notes. Nothing had legally changed hands. Intention is not obligation. That realization wasn't emotional. It was structural. Like discovering a hairline crack before it becomes a failure point. Over the next week, subtle things shifted. Emily asked twice about when we'd be transferring paperwork. Derek asked about equity leverage, casually, mentioning how they might use the property as collateral for a liquidity play. I didn't react. I asked questions instead. What kind of liquidity play? Oh, just timing the market, Derek said. If we hold this asset right, we could pull significant capital. Asset. Not home. Asset. That word stayed with me. I've spent decades protecting clients from poorly structured agreements. I've watched partnerships collapse because one party mistook generosity for entitlement. My daughter had *n speaking about the house in the language of extraction. So I did what I've always done when something feels structurally unsound. I audited the foundation. I scheduled a full appraisal through a broker I've trusted for 15 years, Ryan. Quiet. Competent. No theatrics. If you list now, he told me after reviewing comps, the market's aggressive. This could move fast. I ordered professional photography. Staging. Private showings only. I told no one. Meanwhile, Emily continued sending Pinterest boards, what she'd update once the deed was hers. Derek sent me an article about maximizing underutilized real estate. I listened. I nodded. And I made notes. Because underestimation is a powerful mistake. They believed I was hurt. They believed I was outdated. They believed I would transfer a 7-figure asset out of love and nostalgia without considering leverage. They mistook restraint for decline. They mistook quiet for compliance. They mistook father for fool. And that was their first structural error. I've designed buildings that stand for generations. I understand weight. And I understand pressure. What they didn't realize was this. The house was never the foundation. I was. I didn't rush the listing. Rushing looks emotional. Emotion weakens leverage. Instead, I let the house exist quietly on the private market. No public MLS blast. No social media announcement. Ryan circulated it discreetly to 3 high-net-worth clients looking for custom builds outside Austin. Professional staging transformed the space from traditional to timeless. Neutral textiles. Minimalist decor. Architectural photography taken at golden hour, exactly as I had designed the angles to perform. The appraisal came back at $1. 32 million. Ryan believed it would exceed that. I thanked him and told him to proceed. 3 days later, Emily called. Dad, Derek's lender asked when the deed transfer would happen. We're mapping out financing structures. Financing structures. I leaned back in my chair. Financing for what? Oh, just options. If we want to renovate the kitchen or maybe rework the exterior facade. You know, modernize it. And you'd use the house as collateral? Well, yeah. It's kind of pointless just sitting there. Sitting there. An 18-month build, engineered for longevity, reduced to sitting there. I kept my voice even. The property hasn't transferred yet. There was a pause. What do you mean? It's still in my name. I know that, she said, irritation surfacing. But that's just paperwork. No. Paperwork is structure. And structure is power. That same afternoon, Derek called me directly, something he rarely did without Emily present. Hey, I was thinking, he began, tone friendly but calculated, if we leverage the house properly, we could turn it into a launchpad. There's real opportunity in timing liquidity cycles right now. I'm sure, I replied. He continued. If you transfer the deed before the wedding, we can move quickly. Markets don't wait. There it was. Urgency. Manufactured urgency is often the first signal of extraction. I prefer not to rush legal transfers, I said calmly. After the wedding we'll be fine. Silence. Then a slight tightening in his voice. We're family. Family. Another word that often appears when contracts are inconvenient. I ended the call politely. That evening, Ryan informed me we had 3 serious offers. One at $1. 35 million. One at $1. 38 million. And one, clean, no contingencies, at $1. 4 million. Cash. I reviewed the contracts personally. No financing clauses. 30-day close. I signed the acceptance. I did not inform Emily. 60 days after the word basic, I signed the closing documents. Funds wired. Clear title transfer. Transaction complete. After expenses, my profit margin was substantial. Not life-changing, but significant. I wired the proceeds directly back into my firm's development account and allocated a portion toward a new attainable housing initiative I had been quietly planning. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt equilibrium. The public record updated 24 hours later. That's how Emily found out. My phone rang from an unfamiliar number the following morning. This is the office of Ms. Emily Harper's attorney. Attorney. Interesting. We'd like to discuss a misunderstanding regarding a verbal commitment for property transfer. I sat down at my desk before responding. There was no executed deed, I said evenly. No contract. No written transfer. They assert that you promised the home as a wedding gift. I did not execute a transfer. Promises without documentation are conversations. Not obligations. The attorney's tone sharpened slightly. Our clients may pursue remedies based on reliance. Reliance. A legal term. They were escalating. I suggest you review the title history, I replied. The property was legally mine at time of sale. Silence. Then, we'll be in touch. An hour later, Emily called. Her voice was different. Not irritated. Not dismissive. Controlled. Dad, you actually sold it? Yes. You didn't tell us. You didn't ask. Silence. We were planning our future around that house. I let that sit. You described it as basic. That's not the point. No? Her breathing shifted. Derek structured investments expecting. There it was. Expecting. Expectation built on assumption. You structured investments on an asset you did not own? I asked calmly. She didn't answer directly. Instead, this makes us look unstable. Unstable. Reputation mattered to them. The market was strong, I said. It was a sound decision. You sabotaged us. No. I prevented you. But I didn't say that. I sold my property, I replied. That evening, Derek called again. No pleasantries. You blindsided us. I executed a legal transaction. You knew we were counting on it. You were counting on an asset that wasn't yours. His composure cracked slightly. You're being petty. Petty. The word people use when leverage shifts. Over the next week, subtle pressure began. Emily's messages grew sharper. References to what family does. Mentions of how much I had hurt them. Then something more deliberate. A draft email from Derek outlining how the house had been verbally promised, suggesting that reliance on that promise had influenced financial decisions. It read like preparation. Not emotion. Strategy. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't grieving a home. They were grieving leverage. And leverage, once lost, rarely returns. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived. Formal demand for discussion regarding misrepresentation and detrimental reliance. They had moved from disappointment to attempted coercion. I read the letter twice. Then I called my attorney, not a family lawyer, but a commercial litigator I've known for 2 decades. I forwarded every text. Every email. Every voicemail. I had preserved everything. Always document. He reviewed the situation calmly. No written transfer. No executed agreement. No financial contribution from them. No standing, he said. This isn't *midation. I agreed. I instructed him to respond formally, clarifying ownership and rejecting any implied obligation. Within 48 hours, their attorney's tone softened. No lawsuit filed. No public complaint. Because once documentation enters the room, emotion exits. Emily called once more. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Because you assumed, I replied. She said nothing for several seconds. Then, Derek says you don't trust him. Trust is earned. Not extracted. I trust documentation, I said. The line went quiet. That was the moment I realized something fundamental. They believed my role was to provide. Not to decide. They had structured their future on the assumption that my silence equaled surrender. They mistook experience for decline. And they mistook love for leverage. That was their second structural error. Escalation doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives in the form of an attorney letter drafted too quickly. But once someone shows you they're willing to formalize pressure against you, against family, you stop negotiating emotionally. You respond structurally. And I was just getting started. Escalation is noise. Preparation is silence. After their attorney's tone softened, most people would have relaxed. Assumed the threat had passed. Assumed the message was received. I didn't. Because once someone shows you they're willing to formalize pressure against you, they've revealed something structural about their character. Pressure was not a mistake. It was instinct. So I began auditing everything. Not emotionally. Methodically. First, I reviewed every financial interaction I'd had with Emily and Derek over the last 5 years. Wedding deposits I had covered. Emergency, short-term, transfers. Small, bridge loans, that were never formally documented because I had trusted them. Trust leaves paper trails. Paper trails tell stories. I had always moved money digitally. Clean transfers. Memo lines. Dates. I created a ledger. Total support over 5 years, $287,000. None of it structured as loans. All of it labeled as gifts. But then I noticed something interesting. 3 months before the house was finished, Derek had emailed me a spreadsheet outlining future growth projections, assuming ownership of the property. The spreadsheet included projected refinance amounts and speculative investment returns. He had been planning leverage before the house was complete. That told me this wasn't about aesthetics. It was about capital access. I forwarded the spreadsheet to my attorney. Save that, he said. That's reliance on assumption, not promise. Next, I pulled credit authorization logs from my bank. I had once added Emily as an emergency contact on a secondary account, not as an owner, but with limited visibility access in case of medical necessity. I confirmed she had never been granted transactional authority. Good. Then I ordered a full title activity report on all properties associated with my name. Clean. No fraudulent filings. Still, something bothered me. The speed with which they moved to an attorney suggested preparation. So I did what I've done for decades in business disputes. I widened the lens. I commissioned a discreet financial background review on Derek. Not invasive. Not illegal. Public records. Business filings. Court dockets. His crypto ventures were less stable than he projected. 2 dissolved LLCs in the past 3 years. 1 pending civil claim related to misrepresentation of investment returns. Nothing criminal. But enough instability to explain urgency. I sat with that information for a long time. Emily had aligned herself with volatility. And volatility seeks liquidity. Which explained everything. The house had not been a home to them. It had been collateral. The next step required patience. I invited them to dinner. Neutral ground. My home. They arrived tense. Emily was composed but guarded. Derek wore confidence like armor. I poured wine. Sat down. And let silence stretch. Silence forces people to fill it. Derek did. We didn't expect you to react like this, he began. React. Interesting choice. I executed a sale, I replied. You blindsided us, Emily added quietly. I protected my asset. There it was again. Asset. Derek leaned forward. You don't trust us. I trust documentation, I said. He exhaled sharply. We had plans. You had projections, I corrected. Emily's jaw tightened. You were supposed to support us. Support. An expectation. I have supported you, I replied calmly. Extensively. I slid a printed ledger across the table. Dates. Amounts. Totals. Emily stared at the numbers. Derek did not touch the paper. That's irrelevant, he said. No. It was central. Support is not ownership transfer, I said evenly. And projection is not entitlement. Emily's eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. You're punishing us. Punishment is emotional. This was structural. I am clarifying boundaries. Derek stood. This is unbelievable. No, I replied. This is documented. He left the table. Emily lingered. For a moment, I saw something, not anger, not entitlement, but calculation. She was reassessing. Dad, she said softly, we can fix this. Fix what? The house was gone. The leverage was gone. Or perhaps she meant something else. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I asked one question. If I had transferred the deed before the wedding, would you have used it as collateral within 6 months? Silence. That silence was answer enough. Preparation isn't about revenge. It's about inevitability. I met with my estate planner the following week. We revised everything. Trust structures updated. Property allocations redirected. Business succession plans formalized. No ambiguity. No gray areas. If Emily wished to inherit anything in the future, it would be through structured instruments with oversight, not emotional access. I also redirected a significant portion of the house sale profit into a new development initiative focused on attainable housing for young families. Not luxury. Not leverage. Stability. Irony has weight. As part of that initiative, I established a scholarship fund for first-generation architecture students. Emily had once wanted to study design. She changed paths. But I did not change mine. 2 weeks later, Derek's civil claim resurfaced in public filings. Minor coverage. But enough. I sent a single email to my attorney with the link. Monitor, I wrote. Because instability compounds. And when instability loses external leverage, it turns inward. Preparation is not loud. It is quiet accumulation. Documentation. Boundaries. Structure. They believed escalation would pressure me into reversal. Instead, escalation triggered reinforcement. And reinforcement, once complete, does not bend. What they failed to understand was this. I had already weathered decades of economic cycles. I had negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions. I had watched partnerships implode over far smaller sums. They were playing at strategy. I was operating in structure. And structure always outlasts emotion. The exposure would not come through anger. It would come through consequence. And consequence was already forming. They just couldn't see it yet. Consequence does not arrive loudly. It arrives precisely. 3 weeks after that dinner, Derek's pending civil claim escalated into formal litigation. The plaintiff alleged misrepresentation of investment performance and improper fund commingling. Nothing criminal, yet, but the language in the filing was surgical. I didn't intervene. I observed. Emily called less frequently after that. When she did, her tone was measured. Controlled. Almost cautious. Derek stopped contacting me entirely. Silence from him told me more than words ever had. Then the market shifted. Crypto dipped sharply. One of Derek's remaining ventures froze withdrawals. Publicly, he framed it as temporary liquidity management. Privately, according to filings I monitored, 2 investors demanded accounting transparency. Instability compounds. And when external leverage disappears, people look inward for resources. Emily called one Tuesday evening. Dad, she said carefully, can we talk about the housing initiative you mentioned? Interesting. Yes, I replied. Derek thinks there might be partnership opportunities. If you're expanding development. There it was. A re-entry attempt. I kept my voice calm. There are no partnership opportunities. Pause. Why? Because my firm requires audited financial histories for partners. Silence. She understood the implication. I thought family mattered, she said. Family does matter, I replied evenly. Which is why I won't expose it to volatility. That was the last time Derek's name came up in conversation. 2 weeks later, the civil claim settled, but not quietly. The settlement included a structured repayment schedule and mandatory financial disclosures. Those disclosures became part of public record. The numbers were worse than I expected. Derek had leveraged speculative positions using projected collateral values, including projected equity from the house he never owned. It was documented. In court filings. In his own projections. He had structured forward liquidity assumptions based on my asset. And when the asset vanished, the structure collapsed. I did nothing. I didn't call him. I didn't gloat. Exposure is most powerful when self-generated. Then came the wedding. Smaller than originally planned. Venue downgraded. Guest list reduced. No mention of real estate during speeches. I attended. I shook hands. I maintained composure. During the reception, I noticed something subtle. Conversations paused when Derek approached. Investors he once boasted about avoided eye contact. Reputation moves quietly. Midway through the evening, one of my longtime business associates approached me privately. "I saw the filings," he said. "You handled that well." "I handled nothing," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Exactly." 3 months after the wedding, Derek's firm dissolved. Officially, strategic restructuring. Unofficially, liquidity exhaustion. Emily moved into a rental property. Not because I forced it. Because projections are not foundations. One evening, Emily came to my office unannounced. No Derek. No anger. Just exhaustion. She sat across from my desk and didn't speak for nearly a minute. "I didn't see it," she finally said. "See what?" "The risk. Risk is invisible when wrapped in confidence." "You trusted him," I said. She nodded. "And you thought I would absorb the downside." Tears this time. Real ones. "I thought you'd always protect us." "I did," I replied. She looked confused. "You protected me from a collapse that would have included my name," I said calmly. "If the house had been transferred and leveraged, my reputation would be in those filings too." The realization settled slowly across her face. "You sold it before he could use it," she whispered. "Yes. Not revenge. Prevention." She lowered her eyes. "I called an attorney before I called you," she admitted quietly. "I know. I thought you were being difficult." "I was being deliberate." Silence again. Then something I hadn't heard in a long time. "I'm sorry. Not for the house. For the assumption. Respect is rarely restored through argument. It is restored through consequence." Derek filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months later. Emily did not contest the separation. The divorce was quiet. No public drama. Just paperwork. A year after the word basic, I stood on the same west-facing lot, now owned by the buyer who had purchased it for $1.4 million. They had preserved most of the design. The house still caught the sunset exactly as I'd intended. But it was no longer my concern. My concern was stability. I reinvested the sale profit into the Attainable Housing Initiative. Within 18 months, we broke ground on 42 units designed for young families priced out of speculative markets. Solid foundations. Modest margins. Long-term value. Emily visited one of the completed projects with me last fall. She walked through the units quietly. "These aren't flashy," she said. "No," I replied. "They're stable." "Yes." She ran her hand along the framing near the window. "You always build for longevity." I didn't respond. Because the lesson wasn't about architecture. It was about assumptions. When someone mistakes silence for weakness, they expose themselves. When someone mistakes support for entitlement, they miscalculate leverage. And when someone builds their future on assets they don't control, gravity eventually corrects them. I never yelled. I never threatened. I never retaliated. I reinforced. I documented. I redirected. And when exposure came, it came from their own projections. Emily calls my work solid now. She asks questions instead of making assumptions. She signs nothing without reading it. And she understands something she didn't before. Love does not transfer ownership. Silence does not equal surrender. And experience is not decline. At 65, I no longer design for approval. I design for permanence. They thought the house was the gift. It wasn't. The gift was the boundary. Because the most dangerous mistake you can make with a quiet man who has built his life on structure is to assume he doesn't understand leverage.